Hello friends. So one important questions that often interviewers ask for a project management, agile project interview to agile project managers, business analysts, scrum master is what is a user story? This may seem a basic question, but at times it may not be clear to everyone what exactly a user story is all about. So, if I try to explain what a user story is, this is basically a smaller segments of a broader requirement. Sometimes the requirement can be very big and it will not be possible to execute as the requirement is. So it is important to break the requirement into segments. In project management also, in project management which is traditional, we have a work breakdown structure convention. So similarly, Agile Project Management also has a work breakdown structure activity or a terminology where we break down the work into various segments. This can be of various naming conventions. Sometimes the bigger requirement is known as epic, which is again divided into features, and features are divided into user stories. These conventions might change for different projects, but basically what we all in Agile Project Management World talk about is user stories, which is nothing but smallest segment of a work requirement. So as simple as that. So what the user story should contain. So if we try to have a structure in a user story should have three important things. First is it should have a title, right? Second most important thing, it should have a description. And third, acceptance criteria. So starting with title, if we try to give a format is popular in Agile world where we say as a user. The user can be anyone. User can be an individual, user can be a customer, user can be a developer. As a user, what are you planning to do? Any activity, the small segment of activity that you're planning to do, what is that, right? And eventually, why you are planning to do that, why you are doing. So it basically caters to who, what, and why. Who is as a user, as an individual, as a customer, as a developer. It can be anyone. What actually you're planning to do. It can be a smaller segment of work. And finally, we have why, which says about why you are planning to do that. Who is planning to do a work? What is that work? And why you are doing that work? These three questions are important and form a crucial part of title. Then we have description. In Agile world, we do not give technical jargons in describing a requirement. So what we do is we use words which can be understood to everyone, right? We avoid jargons and we give a brief overview of the entire requirement so that everyone is aware of the actual requirement. And third and the most important part is acceptance criteria. So what is acceptance criteria? This is a critical parameter which is essential in order the work to be accepted by the stakeholder or the customer. So what can those parameters be depending on what you're working on, right? For example, eventually what an individual is planning to do is to make a cake. So how to segregate the activity? There are various activities. You need to get the ingredients, you need to create a dough, you need to make a decoration, you need to add flavors, and finally you need to do the packaging, right? So for example, if you consider creating a dough, right? So creating a dough is an activity, a user story for example. Then what can be the acceptance criteria for accepting the activity of dough making? For that you need to consider various factors. One of them is how many people you want to make the cake for. Suppose you have 10 people for whom you are going to make the cake. So accordingly, you have to have the weight of the cake. It can be 2 pounds, it can be 3 pounds, right? So that can be part of the acceptance criteria. What flavors are you planning? It can be a vanilla flavor, it can be a strawberry flavor, it can be any flavor. So as per the requirement, that can be part of the acceptance criteria. So that's all about acceptance criteria. I hope now the clarity is there about what the user stories should be. You can create user stories, but you can only create good user stories by following INVEST criteria. Now, what is INVEST criteria all about? As the name suggests, each word, each alphabet of INVEST has its own significance. Starting with I. I is independent. So ideally, an user story should be independent of any other user story. It should stand as its own. There should not be any dependency associated with it. So this is easy said than to be done. So at times it may not be possible to have no dependency at all, but it is always advisable to have minimum dependency while creating a user story. Second is negotiable. Remember, user story is the start of a discussion. It is not something which is set on stone. It depends on the discussion between the developers, discussion between the stakeholders, customers. Then we get into creating something which adds some value, right? So negotiable is always a part of a user story. We need to negotiate. We need to come to a common goal. Third is B, valuable. Everything what we do, we only do to create value. Final outcome is always giving value to the end customer. Value is very crucial in creating a user story. Then we have estimable. You should be able to estimate a user story. Now, estimation doesn't mean something which is very precise. Estimation is relative sizing. We should be able to compare between two user stories depending on its complexity, depending on its dependencies. There might be various other factors which are considered when you size the user stories. In order to size the user stories, it must be absolutely clear to everyone what they're planning to do, what they are working on, right? Only and only if we have proper refinement, proper understanding of user stories, you can go ahead and size it. There can be story points estimation, there can be planning poker, there can be relative t-shirt sizing. So it varies. But what is important is able to do a relative sizing for the user stories, and understanding should be absolutely clear in order to do an estimation. Then we have S, small. As we've already said, user stories are smaller segments of a bigger requirement. So it is important the user stories should be small enough so that it can be completed in a quicker period of time within a sprint or two. And being small, it becomes easier for the team members, for any individual or developers or anyone who is working on that particular work item to execute it. It becomes easier to understand, easier to execute, easier to size. Then we have finally testable. Testing is important. Everything we do has to be validated. Unless and until it goes through validation, it cannot be accepted as a complete user story. This can be part of quality measure, but as a user story, to be considered a user story, it is required, it is essential that it can be tested. There can be various forms of tests, but it's important that this parameter is taken care while creating user stories. So that's all about user stories and what a good user story should look like. So thank you everyone, thanks to be part of this video. We'll see you again in the next video. Thanks for joining.